Okay, welcome everybody to our third session of the day of our first DOSA Gold Conference Friday. This session will be recorded. It is closed caption enabled, so if you want to see them and they're not coming up for you, you can enable them in the live transcript at the bottom of your screen. This next presentation is called Making Assessment Work for You by Lexie McCarthy and Alex Karlesses. Lexie is the Director of the Parent and Family Relations, and Alex is a GA in the Career Center and also a second-year HAPSA student. So take it away.
Thank you, Catherine, and thank you everyone for being here today. As Alex so graciously pulls up our presentation, I will just also say thank you. We are grateful that you're here and to talk about some assessment stuff. This presentation really stemmed out of a decision that happened in 2021, where I decided that I needed to stop overcomplicating assessment and really make assessment work for me and my department. So for instance, in 2019, I was doing assessment work that was interesting, but was also not stuff that I could immediately implement to create programming that was intentional. So for instance, I was asking questions about things like, what do you hope for your student? Or what are your hopes for your student's involvement? Again, these things were interesting because it was interesting to see what parents and families were prioritizing, but they weren't things that could directly impact programming priorities and collaboration. So enter 2020 and everything changed, including the parent and family assessment. And I was lucky to be able to have Alex Karlesses by my side as a graduate intern, as she helped me challenge assumptions and we started to think about assessment in a different way. So over to you, Alex, and thanks for being here.
Thanks, Lexie. Yeah, and thank you everyone for your attendance. It's really great to be able to share some of this. I was also, my assumptions about assessment before I started this project with Lexie were, I was very intimidated by it. I thought as a higher ed student affairs professional, it's something that maybe I should try and steer away from until I was at an assistant director, or even director level. But working with Lexie, it just gave me the confidence to just be able to ascertain exactly what goals we wanted out of this and simplify, having a mutual goal of wanting to simplify what exactly we could gain from assessment in the parent and family realm really did help me be able to shift my perspective on just exactly how helpful this can be and how doable it is, even just for someone who, like me, isn't that comfortable with Excel. So it was great. So today, I just wanted to give a brief overview of our agenda and the topics that we'll be covering. So first and foremost, we're going to actually talk about the development and the crafting of the survey and how we went about doing that and how we ended up changing, which leads into the next section that we'll be talking about, our qualitative asks. So what exactly were we were hoping, what information we were hoping to get from parents and how we were able to ask it in a way that made them want to communicate and be honest with us, but also understand just exactly what we were going for and what we wanted from them. Then we'll shift into post results of the qualitative assessment and how to shift that data into program planning and collaboration with on-campus departments and sparking those initiatives based on the information that we were able to ascertain and how it specifically gave us what we needed in order to kickstart that amazing work that we were able to do with other departments. And then finally, just a round out discussion, closing the loop, how to make assessment work, how this data actually helps us, and what tools and resources that we're going to be able to use in the future to just be able to make sure that it works for us and that we are getting the information that we need.
Thanks, Alex. So like Alex said, we will start the first part of our presentation, just giving you a sort of a high level overview of the assessment, some key pieces of the actual assessment and also results. So next slide, please. Okay, so this adorable photo just popped up in our family weekend photos that I just can't get enough of. These people were just so excited, Ram Fam proud. So I had to share that. But the purpose of this survey was to discern and gather information about how Westchester supports parent and family needs, and as well as figuring out the services that can be better advertised and improved to create a more cohesive Ram Fam experience. So I think what's important, again, as I said, in 2019, when this department was first starting, the survey was really intended to figure out what was needed. So they were like, we need a website. We need social media. We want a monthly newsletter, and these things were all very doable. So there was a very tangential, a very clear line from like needs to making things happen. This second iteration of the survey, the 2021 survey, was really intended to figure out what parents and families needed, and to figuring out some programming priorities moving forward. So that also presented some goals for programming and also prioritization of collaboration and communication. So again, the questions asked looked a little different. Instead of asking like, what are your hopes for your student, which is a research interest of mine, but not directly related to the work of this department, we asked families to rate their familiarity with campus resources. We asked them about their preferred communication. We asked them about how they felt like we were doing in terms of parent and family relations, and then what were their relationships to their student. And again, this was specifically to figure out how our resources were helping to understand how they were translating to the student experience. So if you do read the newsletter, some like good Qualtrics logic here, if you read the newsletter, what are the things that you talk to your student about from the newsletter? So again, very specific questions about the programming and communication that was coming out of this office. We also specifically asked for families to check all that apply of like their concerns and the topics that they, again, most discussed with their students. So just so you have an idea of some of the fast facts, 2,639 participants. This was up 300% from the people that responded in 2019. Again, this was clear that we had engaged a different audience in that time. We were doing some better outreach to parents and families. We had an office established with the website and the social media. But we also, again, this intention of this survey was really to set some programming priorities. 93% of families agreed that Westchester welcomed parents and families, and 85% of participants agreed that Westchester provided enough information about programming. We wanted to really tap into that 15% of folks that were like, I need a little bit more. We did find that families were most familiar with billing, housing, and financial aid, which is a good sign, right? Those are sort of like the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the bottom rung. They knew how to get housing. They knew how to pay their bill. But in terms of those second, third, fourth rungs of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we weren't really making the mark. So the next slide shows some of this assessment results. You'll see here the billing, the on-campus housing. There was a lot of familiarity with these resources. You'll see at the bottom, the career planning, the mental health, the off-campus housing were areas that the families really wanted some more support and wanted more familiarity. So this is that quantitative data. And then next, we're going to move really into Alex's piece of the presentation, which was the qualitative. So over to you, Alex.
Yeah, sure. So essentially, like this comes like the hard part of the survey. So once you get all of the results in, what exactly do you do with them? And how can you make this essentially work and create a story almost from the data to advocate for the wants, the desires for your department and turn that into tangible information as well as helpful information for not only for you, but to be able to advocate to your supervisors, higher up administrators, to be able to say, look, this is where how we need to meet parents where they're at, or even more specifically for the departments that you guys, the people attending the session coincide with, how can you make that specific needs for your specific department and what exactly you desire and what you need to advocate for. So essentially, we're going to shift into how to pose these questions, what exactly we asked, and essentially, our advice to you is as we were going through and digging up all of these answers and sifting through this data, you want to make sure that you understand the actual purpose of your survey. So what are you trying to accomplish? For us, it was really just trying to understand not exactly like what your students are hoping for, like the less tangible versions of those questions, but what exactly are you familiar with? What are we doing well? What can we improve on? And how can we best go about that for you? What do you want to see? These are also based, our actions were based on positive and negative answers. So we did get some very, how shall I say this, passionate answers in our survey, but we want to caution and advise you to not shy away from these answers and instead use that and repurpose that to further advocate for your needs and even show that there is a greater line of urgency here. So even put a positive spin on it. The parents and families might not do that for you, but you certainly can. And how can you use that overall to cultivate a story? So based on the results that you receive, what can you change realistically? Where are there avenues of communication that you can either establish with your target audience or across campus with different departments that might be able to help you reach your goal? And last but not least, what do you really want and need to know? Simply just ask this. It really does come down to not overthinking. Really, what can we ask from our target audiences that are clear? The questions are clear cut, concise, and really don't let your target audience overthink. They really are just sharing their most initial base thoughts that are going to be the most helpful to you. Examples of this are, how could we improve programming? How could we improve communication? What additional feedback do you have for us? These questions are open-ended, but they do have a very specific point to them, and letting the families take them, specifically our target audience of parent and families, they really were able to take it however they wanted. And they weren't, while the questions were focused definitely in Westchester ideals and goals, they weren't leading questions. And they did not include a lot of, let's just say, student affairs specific buzzwords that parents and families might not be as connected to as their students might be, or that we are. Sometimes student affairs, we can be in a little bit of a bubble, which is great. But in order to be able to effectively communicate with our target audience, you might need to take some of that language and jargon out as we proceed further into the survey. Then we finally moved into the actual qualitative coding and theme creation, which I did not have too much prior experience with, again, prior to this project. However, it was actually through a little bit of research and practice, I really was able to get it down and I think really ascertain a lot of helpful information from this. So essentially, what you're doing when you receive your results and you're trying to link all of these together and create a story from this, what's really helpful is setting up themes in terms of the responses that you receive. So it's about systematically categorizing these results in order to provide patterns in research, in order to put that in the executive report to make it easier for people to read and understand exactly what the results were. So I used a method called ground up coding, which is just a fancy term for saying you are deriving your codes from the data and you're not going in with any preconceived notions about what you're going to find. You might have hopes and goals, but overall, those are not affecting what you are seeing in the black and white data in your Excel spreadsheet. So it's really great for exploratory and narrative research. So if you're trying to craft a narrative from this, maybe putting it in a report to advocate for further resources and even funding for your department, this is going to be really helpful for you. And looping back what we were saying earlier, it's really helpful, again, not to go into preconceived notions. You can have goals for what you want the survey to accomplish, but let the parents and families or your target audience tell you what they need. Don't tell them for them, essentially, is what our overall goal was. So essentially, my method involves sifting through the data multiple times in order to appropriately gather a picture of what parents and families wanted to see and assign themes using the participants' own words. So examples that I had were improved communication, COVID fallout, improved academic services. The goal is to make these just general enough that you can combine a lot of these responses in them. And overall, they just serve as a great repurposed tool to be able to engineer further advocacy and funding for your office. So overall, the actual specific themes that we found overall were that families, without going into my codes, families expressed displeasure and disappointment about academics specifically and online courses amidst the global health pandemic. However, the caveat here that I found interesting was that families also thanked the university for the COVID closure decisions and the communication that was sent directly to families and guardians. So while they were happy with the overall safety protocols that were taken, they were less happy with the fallout of COVID in terms of their students' online access to class and feeling like they weren't getting as good of an education through these online virtual means. Families also indicated their lack of satisfaction with dining services, academic advising, and the need for more communication from those areas, as well as career planning too. So essentially, we started learning about we needed to start to push forward the demystification of certain offices on campus, and just being able to find out specifically what those were through the parents' and families' own mouths was really helpful in being able to give us that kickstart that we needed. And again, overall expressed desire for more communication from career planning, mental health, and not on-campus housing, but off-campus housing.
Before we go to the next slide, I want to say something quick. First and foremost, I think it's really important to know that like a lot of my colleagues in parents and family relations like didn't do a survey in 2021 because they were like, it's going to be all about COVID. But I don't think that that is a good excuse, because families, sure, there was some COVID stuff, which we expected, but there was also a lot of other really helpful insights that they probably provided more candidly because more people were in front of their screens. They were home, they were able to fill out a survey, and they were also thinking about the university in different ways. So while a lot of my colleagues across the university and across the country in doing some of this work shied away from assessment during this time, I would encourage you to continue on with assessment efforts. Because people are thinking differently, and that thinking differently really encouraged us to create different modes of communication and programming priorities. The second thing I want to say on this slide is that this qualitative process would not have happened without Alex. Skimming through those answers, first of all, is emotionally taxing. We all know that when we get like really tough answers on surveys because we're too close to it. And also like the heavy lifting of some of that coding takes time. And I felt incredibly blessed to have Alex's support and help, and also giving her that experience to do some of that coding work. Hopefully, Alex, you'll have to keep me honest on this, provide an opportunity for learning for her, but also it was a time opportunity to take that off my plate this summer with orientation stuff. So kudos to Alex for doing that. And taking that time to do the qualitative work, because I think so often it's easy to kind of put that information to the side because it's harder to discern, but we really got a lot of helpful themes and feedback from Alex's hard work.
Thanks for saying that, Lexie. I really appreciate it. And yeah, this is not me sucking up. I really did learn a lot this summer. It was a really great opportunity for me to just be able to demystify that process and really feel like I was able to dig into the data. So I appreciated the opportunity.
And one more thing that I will say is that I think Alex, seeing some of the comments from parents and families, we did this in the spring before she started helping me this summer with orientation, really gave her the opportunity to see where parents and families were coming from. I think across campus, there's a lot of moaning about and groaning about parent and family engagement. But I think from the comments and the responses to the survey, you can get a sense that parents and families are really just passionate about the student experience and want their students to have the best experience possible. So I think that it helped prime you for what you saw this summer in terms of the parent and family engagement ideology. So the next thing we're going to talk about is how we close the loop and move forward with the data that we found as a result of both qualitative and quantitative to initiate new opportunities.
Sorry.
I think, perfect. Okay, so the data showed us we needed more campus collaboration out of parent and family relations with academic affairs, the counseling center, career development, housing, particularly off-campus housing, and dining. We used information to cultivate these themes of a collaboration, and there was a priority there to move forward with the collaboration and a good base for future initiatives. The first thing we did before we even moved into those first three areas is we were planning family weekend, and we said, okay, what are the top 4 concerns and how do we get these people in front of families at family weekend without it being laborious or a long investment from these offices. So the first thing we did before we even moved into these 3 really intentional ongoing projects is we invited colleagues from off-campus and commuter services, the counseling center, academic affairs, and career development to do 20-minute TED Talk style presentations about their offices at our Ram Fam Empower Hour, which was literally an hour on the Sunday of Family Weekend virtual, where families have gotten a lot of really great feedback from that program. But again, it just was a direct indication from that survey, major areas of concern, and throwing it into family weekend. So that was a really quick, dirty, and easy way to integrate results. And thank you to the many of the colleagues on this call who served in that role and took part in the RAM-FAM Empower Hour, because I know and I have heard that families really appreciated that, because they were like, these are really all my top areas of concern. And it was very easy for us to say, well, it was the results of the survey. But also they felt very seen and heard in that program. So the additional 3 programs that we really want to highlight are our RAM-FAM Top 5, the Family Common Read series, and our summer podcast series. Again, these were all created as a result of the results from that survey. Again, here you'll see the results of the greatest concern. So we showed you before the familiarity. This sort of flipped the narrative on that. And we looked at the data in terms of the class year as well. So it was interesting to see that, like, across the board, families and parents were concerned about academics and career planning. Involvement was a big concern for our first year families. So from that, we've started doing a Ready RAM-FAM newsletter that happened this fall that is truly just intended to reach first and second year families because of COVID, about one of the major topics was involvement, and that had one of the highest open rates all semester. So again, using this data to really make data informed decisions. You'll also see here the greatest concerns aligned with those areas that we talked about, and they aligned with the concerns that the Parent and Family Council is also bringing to me. So there was a lot of alignment in terms of like data-wise triangulation. So the RAM-FAM Top 5 is a project that Alex worked on that I think is really important that she shares about because she took the lead.
Well, sure. Again, like Lexie said, based on the survey respondents and those results from career planning, academic advising, off-campus housing, mental health resources, and dining, we were really able to know the areas where we needed increased communication from. Therefore, it gave us that ability to be able to reach out to these offices at the very beginning of summer. I think in June is when we reached out to them with a survey form for them to complete, which essentially would give us the most important information, upcoming deadlines from their offices, and we were able to compile it into a specific newsletter that didn't go out with the regular parent and family newsletter, but did have a definitely more of an urgency to it, and that overall just gave us that avenue for increased communication that was way more targeted. So it was a focused series of communication in, again, a preferable format, which is email, no surprise there, which was also indicated to us by the survey. We got a lot of good feedback already that our existing channels of communication through email and newsletters were very well received. So being able to combine those two was really helpful for us, and being able to know that once we sent it out, we knew that we were doing our best in terms of being able to already like listen to parents and families. And overall, we were just able to further highlight those concern areas to be able to again, demystify those sections of campus that parents and families might not have had as much of an idea about. And I think this is really encapsulate of our experience through this final bullet point that we have that I actually took directly from the survey, where one respondent said, I think WCU has a lot to offer and is a great school. I'm also an alumni. Having said that, I have no idea what's going on in most of the areas of this survey. I also wouldn't have a clue where to go if I needed assistance. I thought the communication had to be through the student, as they are now adults. I didn't know I had access to so much as a parent, which is a good and bad thing. So you can see that the responses that we were getting from parents and families, most of them just weren't one-off like, oh, everything sucks or everything's great. They actually did take the time to really flesh out and give us these very detailed and nuanced responses, which were very helpful in us being able to determine, okay, well, how important is this to them? And they were really able to let us know. And especially with the intersectionality of this particular respondent, not only being a parent, but as well as an alumni, we were really able to take these concerns very seriously. And also just, which ended up taking the form of RAM-FAM Top 5 and making them as specific, targeted, and focused as possible. And so essentially, just to give you all an idea of the timeline that we were able to put together. So we sent out another survey form, again, like I mentioned, to academic advising, dining, career services, housing, those departments, with a loose deadline of when to complete. Usually, I think we set it for like mid-July. So this was in summer of 2021. So the questions were designed for departments to be able to give us their entire fall semester schedule in any format that they wished. So it really was up to them to be able to give us that information, again, on their own time, but usually we were very much in control of the situation, which felt good to, again, to just be able to get a jump start on that. And then we then gathered and disseminated the information in our own creative and entertaining way that we knew families would respond to. So that way they don't have to check 5 different Instagram sites or 5 different pages on the website. We were able just to give that disseminate format of information right there and then, which I think parents found to be very helpful. And the results overall, we've received pretty good feedback because it's the overall format of the RamFam Top 5, and our overall goal is that it's digestible and bite-sized content, as opposed to parents, again, like that survey respondent said, they didn't realize they had access to so much. This is giving them that window and that pipeline to understand that they do have access to a lot without making it overwhelming.
I will also add that I think it was important that we made the top 5 in a list. We found that lists do really well for parents and families. Also, it was sort of capitalizing on that idea of like digesting like the news, synthesizing the news, like those the daily grind, or like those top results that people are so interested in because of the short attention spans, that they just have all the information right at their fingertips in a nice, easy list. So lists did really well. And I could see that from looking at my newsletters and what people were clicking on. So I think that was helpful too.
And again, if this sounds very straightforward and simple, it's because that was the goal. And the overall point of looking at the while sifting through the data and these qualitative analytics might be overwhelming at first, the point is to not overthink them and to really listen. Like, if parents are asking me this in black and white and I'm getting over 100 responses asking for at least some format of something similar, there's your answer. It's not supposed to be overthought.
Yes, thank you. So another thing that I was hearing from parents and families from the survey was that our first year families who were responding to their spring survey were saying, like, I still feel very disconnected. I don't feel that I'm getting everything I can. And at that point, we weren't planning these RAM refreshers for our sophomore families this summer. So we were really just planning a first year summer orientation. And I knew that we were probably missing out on some of these sophomore families who were feeling a lot like first year families, who had these concerns that we knew about, while we were also integrating a whole new class of first year families. So in addition to some of the things that were happening in orientation, I wanted to introduce a family common read, which I marketed as like the best book club ever, because they didn't need to read the book. And really, I targeted the chapters that aligned with our parent and family survey of the things that people were most concerned about, partnering with colleagues, and then premiering videos on Facebook Live. Again, the families were saying to us, we check Facebook. They liked that I was curating individual posts every day that were related to the parent and family experience in some way. And then I chose sections of the book, specific chapters that highlighted the areas that were important to within the parent and family survey. So not surprisingly, my colleague Tabitha Adkins' session about academic affairs was the most well-viewed. 625 views was probably the highest I've ever gotten on anything. Again, it was Facebook Live, so it met that need within our survey, and an intentional selection of campus partners who were of interest to our families and parents, and reaching all families, not just those who could attend orientation or could attend an in-person event. And you can see at the top of the quote, I need to be more involved. This past year was rough. It was tough to engage due to the pandemic. So we knew that there were families who still felt a lot like first year families, and wanted some additional support. So this was one way that we made some movement towards that. And then the other way, go to the next slide. was the RAM-FAM Podgram. So this was not anything new, but what was new is that we decided to do a 6-podcast series because mental health was a primary concern, both in the qualitative and quantitative area. Rachel Daltrey is the best campus partner for me. She invited me to an early counseling center staff meeting in the spring, and we sort of started brainstorming opportunities to work together. And she was like, hey, why don't I ask my team what they're interested in? So I knew mental health was a major concern. I was able to get into her staff meeting. And then she offered, as a kind campus partner does, like, let me talk to my team about what they're interested in. And then they came up with these areas that we then ran with, of areas that they wanted to talk about on a podcast. So the counselors emailed us their areas of interest, and then Alex executed. So over to you, Alex.
Yeah, so what was really helpful about this is because we were able to have this meeting so early within the spring semester, even though we set this as a summer podcast series, we knew that the counseling center does not work during the summer. So we were actually able to pre-record these throughout the spring semester over the course of a few months. And then we were able to release them over the summer, so that way parents were able to have that information. Usually when they were able to start thinking about that transition to college, and boom, we were able to meet them right there where they were. And that timed release, I think, was really helpful in that they weren't just sitting on Spotify or like our avenues that we use to release our podcasts. They weren't just sitting there for a bunch of weeks and like collecting dust. Essentially, they looked really timely, fresh, and new, even though we had recorded them over the past couple of months. So it was actually really a really neat project, and just being able to not talk about mental health in such general terms, but really being able to get into that specific focus of setting boundaries, family communication, making this mental health in conjunction with the student's health, but also how families can support their student if they're encountering any of these issues or crises, or even just typical managing medication, like things that come just with in a pretty regular typical student's life. It was really helpful to be able to, again, I use that word demystify, and also just make this seem more real, attainable, and tangible.
So, I mean, here's the nuts and bolts of it. We really were interested in making assessment work, highlighting how the assessment informed programming and priority decision making, because the questions we asked were those that would actually inform work. So Alex, if you'll go to the next slide, we have some points that we want to just make sure are crystal clear. So the one survey provided feedback in actual real time to provide advocacy for resources, collaboration conversations, and new programming opportunities. I think what's really important, and I want to hammer home on this slide, is that when campus colleagues saw that families were really concerned about things, they were eager to partner, because they saw that this wasn't just like, oh, here's another program. It was responding to a need and a concern in a way that we were filling a gap and providing resources. So it helped in starting those collaboration opportunities because there was data that was informing that partnership. It wasn't checking a box, it was filling a need. Also, oh wait, go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
No problem. Also, parents and family feedback reflects the student concerns. Like, we know that our students have these concerns, but we also know our students aren't as likely to fill out surveys or to provide the feedback. So this was sort of a real insight into actual student concerns as well, because they're more likely to talk to their parents and families than us in a lot of ways. The phone call to the family is probably more reticent than the phone call to a campus office. So I think it really did provide insight into the student experience as well as the parent and family experience. And a lot of the parents and families will say that, right? Like, I'm not worried about this, but I know my student is, and that's what we want to know. So even if the results were negative, we use that to our advantage. Again, as I said, Alex really did a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of reading through some of those negative comments, which we know we'll get. But I think, again, provided insight into the student and family experience. That, like, it was a tough year, and we had anticipated some of that negativity and sort of allowed that to roll with the punches into some positive programming, proactive programming. So we are at a tight 11:35. We're happy to answer any questions. Alex, if you want to unshare the screen, I think that makes things a little bit easier as we discuss. But we're happy to chat about anything or talk about collaboration or what we did. I know it's pretty straightforward, but we are excited about the topic and to partner on this.
So first of all, thank you so much, Lexie and Alex. That was awesome, and just a great example of how you put assessment to use. I know assessment can be intimidating for a lot of us, but this was practical information that you use to apply to your work. And Alex, there's no way that I would have known that you were a novice at assessment, because you nailed it.
Thank you.
So kudos to you, and thank you, Lexie, for being such a good mentor for Alex. So great job.
Thank you so much.
I can't say enough wonderful things about Alex. Alex was great. I also will say that Alex and I, as we were thinking about like the family weekend feedback, like we didn't send out a survey that was like, how was the food, right? Like, because we know not a lot of things we can't change. We did send out an email that said, if you have concerns or things that didn't go as well as you would have hoped, let us know. And we got probably 20 emails from families who were like provided actually really good feedback that will help us inform practice versus like things about like things that we won't be able to change. So we asked questions about things that we could actually change. So yes, thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Alex.
Thank you both.
Other questions for Alex squared?
Hi, I have a question. Thank you both. This was awesome. I appreciate it. Did you, and if I missed this, I apologize, but I know there was like a ton of collaboration that happened on the back end with the survey. Was there collaboration with building the survey? And I guess my question is, if there was, how did you kind of like maintain what your purpose of the survey was while also like accepting feedback into that, but that still kept that focus? Because I know like that is something that I've struggled with in the past with some survey development that we've done that's a little bit more campus wide, like making sure that we're like still staying on the path and we're focused on like what we're trying to really study and uncover, and trying to be collaborative because we want that input, but then not having it turn into something that you didn't intend for it to turn into.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good question. And that's sort of what happened with my 2019 survey. Like I was being asked to ask questions around like learning outcomes and like integrative learning. And that's sort of what Alex was saying with like the buzzwords didn't work. People were like, what are you talking about? So when Amanda, Alex, and I started sitting down to talk about this survey, I pulled in examples from my colleagues at RIT. Her name's Chelsea Petrie, and she's done a lot of research with parents and families. So I brought that in as a benchmark. And also I think was able to talk through like, this didn't help me. And I want to be able to do a survey that helps me. And I was probably doing a lot of self-advocacy and pushing back. But it was created in partnership with Amanda. But I was really committed to asking questions that were going to support programming opportunities. And then I think the benchmarking of colleagues doing this work across the country helped.
Yeah, that's a good point. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments for our presenters?
I just want to say I'm thankful for you all to be here. I'm thankful for you all as campus partners. Everyone in this call has been people that I've reached out to and connected with and partnered with to improve the parent and family experience, which in turn promotes the student experience and makes a better experience. So thank you all for being great campus partners too.
Is my slide showing up on the screen?
Sure is, Sarah Hinkle.
Okay, because it's